Hello, everyone. I'm Lakai Newman with Soda. Thank you for joining today's call. The most successful digital agencies succeed by hiring incredibly talented people who are awesome at their craft and then providing them with the opportunities that align their personal growth ambitions with those of the organization. In order to pull this off, digital services companies need to establish reliable, predictable, and repeatable operations that maximize profits, creating opportunities that drive growth for the business and its people. Today's discussion explores best practices and measurable outcomes adopted by successful digital agencies and how they support a growth mindset. In partnership with Parallax, we're joined by CEO Tom O'Neill and Cameron Diarmond, Managing Partner and Executive Creative Director at Conscious Minds. Before I turn over to Tom, a few notes before we begin. We are recording today's call to return highlights to you and your teams. Please feel free to ask questions, share your thoughts and reactions in the chat or the Q&A function. We will do our best to address all questions and will capture ideas for future discussions as well. I will turn over to Tom to kick it off.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. I appreciate the time that you put into this and preparing, and I hope that we have a really good discussion today. We're going to do our best to keep this casual. Cam and I have known each other a long time. We've worked with each other and had some fun building businesses together. So again, we'll try to keep it as casual and conversational as possible. And we love questions, so bring them, please. And I guess the big objective for us today is to try to take that growth mindset and think about why it's cool. You know, why do we care about growth as an organization beyond the revenue and margin? Thinking about the people that are in our business and what it means to them and how we can kind of align those needs with the needs of our business and our customers. And so just brief introductions. We're going to talk a little bit about like how we think about growth, not just revenue, and then introduce some ideas for like baseline operational cadences and best practices that we think every digital agency should adopt at some level. We're going to just spend like, maybe 5-10 minutes on that, and then break into a conversation around how Conscious Minds has been able to evolve and, transform themselves over the last few years with that growth mindset. But before we get into that, I will turn it over to Cam just to give you guys a brief introduction of who he is and what Conscious Mind does.
Hey, good morning, everyone, or I guess good afternoon for some of you guys. I'm on the West Coast. Thanks, Tom. It's great to be here with everyone. CEO, managing partner, ECD. I don't know. We all carry a lot of titles these days, right? We've all worn a lot of hats at our companies, and so back in the day, creative director, it was just two of us, and I can't let go of the creative side of things. So, yes, I'm CEO now, but still holding on to that ECD chops and living that life as much as I can. Conscious Minds, we are a content studio working with brands, and we've been doing that for about 12 years now, 14 years now. I can't recall, honestly, about 14 years. And so, but about the last 11 or so, we've really been in the branded space. So we're everything from strategy, creative development, production, and post-production, all in-house, working with Fortune 500 companies to create content strategies on an evergreen kind of 360 model. So kind of a little perspective. We'll talk more about that later.
Very cool. And I have been extremely impressed with Cam and his entire team as I've gotten to know them over the last few years. The work that they do is incredible. The biggest brands in the world. But what's really, I think, the most notable, and we'll talk a lot about it, hopefully, is how he's been able to provide this opportunity for his employees and his coworkers to pursue their best self, like to learn and to grow and to develop, and how he's made that, into profitable growth for his business as well. So, and, my name's Tom. I'm the founder of Parallax. Parallax is a product that was born really from my previous experience growing another company called Nerdery. I actually started my career as a programmer, but found my way into this like digital services world, building custom software for big brands. And Nerdery, when I left my post as CEO a few years back in 2017, we were about 85 million in annual sales with 500 people in 4 offices. And 14 years of profitable growth didn't come easy. We had a lot of challenges related to the things we'll talk about today, how to balance like operational best practices with being really focused on people and the craft. That can be tough. And so again, Parallax is a product that we kind of wish we had while growing Nerdery. And it's born from the input of great organizations like Conscious Minds and innovative leaders like Cam, and and put into life. And a lot of people are using it to help them run their agencies or consultancies today. But we're not here to talk about Parallax as much as we are to talk about what I think is just a really common theme in the industry right now, especially for organizations at the level that I believe people on the call today represent. The Society of Digital Agencies tends to have organizations that are beginning to mature. They're definitely investing in themselves and learning how to be better businesses. And many of you guys are 50 or more, or even up to 500 people in their organization, which I think is really cool. You guys clearly understand that growth is valuable beyond the dollars. But what does growth really mean? Again, beyond that, revenue number or headcount number. I think that we should break it down on a number of different spectrums, but to make it simple, I'm drawing from this benchmark that I think is really neat. An organization called Service Performance Index does an annual survey of a few thousand different service organizations, agencies, consultancies, IT service companies. And they publish this report where they kind of grade these different organizations on their maturity level. And what we found is that the majority of digital services companies, if we dimension that data by digital agencies, the majority of them, 80% of them, feel like they're stuck in what we'd call like this heroic phase of their business, where we all kind of start there as operators or founders or creative directors. When the agency is small, we're really just focused on being awesome at the craft, and the rest will follow. If we're really good at the work, we get referrals to other customers. It's easier for us to recruit good people because they want to work with other smart, like-minded people. And before we know it, we're pretty big. We're 20, 30, 40 people. And we wake up one day and we realize, man, like, this isn't as fun as it once was when we started the business, where it's becoming less about the craft. And I'm starting to stay up all night worrying about like, do we have enough work? Do we have too much work? Is somebody going to quit? You find yourself very reactive and opportunistic. And again, reliant on the heroic effort of individuals rather than having processes that can be foundational and help us be more measured and consistent. And so many of us, we try to make this leap from like being just heroic to, that operational, best practices focused organization where they're not just awesome at the craft, but they're awesome at all of those things that make us measured and consistent. I believe that this is a very important part of the evolution of a business. But it's only just the beginning. The most important thing that I think we should be doing, because what is growth? Is it just headcount? Is it just revenue? I believe no. I think growth means that we need to evolve and we need to innovate in our service offering. What we're doing today will be commoditized tomorrow. And if we don't have measured and consistent process that helps us like baseline, feel like we're not as reactive or reliant on heroic effort, it's really hard to put any strategic energy or time into discovering what's next and figuring out what that market needs from us that we're not providing yet, and staying ahead of the curve so that we're not being commoditized as, this baseline set of services that we've developed mature. And so, there's a whole bunch of bullets here that I won't drain, but most organizations, I believe, will find themselves somewhere on this maturity model. And these bullet points are kind of meant to represent some of the things that we'll need to develop as we get to strategic. And Cam will have some stories about how you've gotten from the heroic maturity to strategic. But if you had to like just give us how long did it take you to get out of that mode where you were reliant on the heroic effort of individuals, into a point where you got your operations pretty tight and your leadership team has a regular opportunity to think about what's next?
Yeah. No, it's a really good question, Tom, and I'll give you some more perspective about our agency specifically, to everyone who's here. So, I think when Tom and I really met, I think our agency was about 20 people, and we had kind of stayed very niche and very small for a very long time and had a lot of outside vendors and freelance community since we were here in LA, and we could scale when we needed to. And now we're, 75 people, and we just acquired a 50-person agency. And so I think that entire journey was probably, the heroic was, we wrestled with the heroic world for a long time, where we were unsettled there. Tom, I think we had aspirations to become what operational was or look like, or the outcomes of it, the desired outcomes, or even strategic, but I don't think we understood like these three dimensions, right? These three parts of the spectrum, but we had an aspiration for it, and we saw it in the success of other companies. And so we wrestled with that. And I think we kind of tackled that in our own way, kind of trying to meander through a maze, at times. And before we really kind of sought some insight and perspective. And then we became aware, and we had the knowledge, and now, okay, great, can we put that knowledge into practice? And let me tell you the amount of times we fell off that bicycle, right? Like, it just was so many scrapes and bruises, and pointing at each other and kind of placing blame, as founding partners, of just like, no, it's more of this, it's less of that, so I think it was, kind of an awakening and enlightenment, if you would. And then it took a lot of focus, and it took a lot of intentionality. And you know what? It's one of the hardest things I've ever done, because I was a hero in our agency. And that is part of our narrative, is that we put it on our back and we did it, but we couldn't scale that, right? And so we had to let go. And that's the hardest thing I've ever had to do, is to let go in our agency and empower others. And that's how we kind of got to this point. But it took us a while. Yeah.
I think that's a great point. Like, it's going to take a while, and it's hard. It's hard to grow out of that heroic mode. I think because we're naturally designed around being reactive. These agencies that we build, we start with that craft in mind, and as we scale, we just kind of solve problems as they come up. If we're on that roller coaster of like too much work, not enough work, we kind of focus on where the business needs us from a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. And so it's not a surprise that, we sell a bunch of work, and then we do it and we stop selling. And then we're like, oh no, we need more work. So we start selling again. And we kind of, we're on that roller coaster or that treadmill. It's not a surprise that we develop a lot of processes and a lot of habits around being the hero, as you described it, Cam. And this is one of the, examples that I love to call out around the friction that is a result of those like natural habits that we've designed or adopted, I guess, kind of bad habits that are reactive. And that, we've got a group of people. Some agencies don't like to call it sales, but I just like to kind of call it as it is. Like, the people who are trying to get new accounts, new work, people who are at sales and marketing, they might be real bullish on like the opportunity in front of us. Like, there's so much new great work out there. We're talking to these big brands. And if those people on the delivery side would just act like they wanted to win it, we're going to have a record year, record quarter, And the delivery lead people will say like, look, guys, like, I get it. There's all this cool work that you want to win, but look, we're already kind of maxed out on the work that we could do with the stuff you've already sold, much less all this new stuff. So we can barely get these projects done without losing customers or employees by burning them out. Like, you can't blame us for being a little conservative in our bids, because at least if we win them, we'll have the money to figure it out. And that's sort of your people that are in charge of HR, recruiting, whatever. They're going to be like, you guys have this argument every single week. Which is it? Is it too, do you need to hire a bunch of people or not? Because I need some lead time too, because which of the talent do you need to hire? Is it creatives? Is it developers? Is it project managers, account managers? Is it strategists or content people? Like, who and when do you need them? Because I need a plan, right? And that's when your finance person, and she's like, yo, time out. We're not hiring anybody until we actually get some of this work, because we don't want to end up down here in utilization and have to worry about laying people off or furloughs or whatever. Like, that's just not going to work. So we'll wait till we get the deals. And again, these points of friction are really natural, because we've got processes that are built around being ad hoc and reactive. But what also kind of sucks about these is they tend to be emotional, because each of the people in this conversation, they're kind of looking at the business from a more narrow perspective. They don't actually have a chart like this that helps them understand, like, what if, what if we close all that work, or what if we don't? And so they're all bringing to this conversation what they think is, again, right for the business from their point of view. And that tends to lead to these discussions that are based on gut and instinct and feel, and not on strategic decisions. And so without the shared perspective, it tends to be like argumentative instead of strategic, like I said. So if they actually had this data, they could come together as a group and say, you know what, we're making a bet to hire like half the people we think we need. We can't afford it. We're probably not going to end up down here. Are you guys all willing to make that risk together? Let's go, versus I think we should do this. I think we should do this. Not because they're jerks, just because that's the point of view that they have from their part of the business. So I believe that some of these operational best practices, these habits that we're going to introduce here, are going to help take the guesswork out of this, be less reliant on gut, but also like set us up to be forward looking and not so reactive. And that's a very important part of what we're trying to do here. I just wanted to skip the grow with confidence slide more quickly. So, and we're going to go into more detail with like how Cam did this. We're going to ask him a bunch of questions. We're going to have like that conversation. But just to give you a sense for the way that we think about it, is that there are people in your business who are account managers, project managers, maybe you call them product managers. There's people who are in charge of like resource planning, like maybe you call it traffic or resource manager, or maybe it's a discipline lead or a practice lead. There's people who are collaborative during the sales process. And then there's like your operational and strategic leadership teams. And I believe that like those first groups of people, the people who are on the front line, who are closest to the people, whether those are our clients and customers, or whether those are our individual contributors on the team, if we can help those people on the front line, the project managers, the resource managers, the people who are collaborating in sales, if we can help them build these like basic foundational habits and behaviors, it can create an environment where we have a much better look at what's happened, but also what's happening in the business, what is going to happen. And that allows the discipline leads, the sales leaders, the operational leaders in the business to more easily develop best practices for looking forward. Again, if we have the data, if we have the habits to build that data on the baseline, we can have much better habits around forecasting. And eventually that leads to, on a monthly level, making strategic decisions, not reactive decisions. If we're looking forward, if we develop the acumen for like what to measure, why to measure it, and how to think about it, it helps us, again, be, even on a monthly basis, focused on things that are strategic and transforming the business. Does that hopefully make sense to folks? Very cool. All right, and that's my last slide. I think, like I said, this is more of a conversation, less of a presentation. And so with that, I kind of want to dive in and ask Cam to tell us the story of Conscious Minds. Cam, you made a transition from being that like creative director who's the hero focused on the craft and winning new work, but delivering the work, to a strategic leader that transformed Conscious Minds. But how did that start, and how did you approach that?
No, I mean, it's a really good question. And I think, look, everything is, for everyone who's at an agency, the size that we were and the size that we are, that everything is just such this evolutionary process. And like I said, I think that there was deep aspirations to continue to grow our agency, right? To grow our footprint, to grow our success. We were working with incredible brands. We were having a great time. And then we were burnt out. And then we weren't seeing scale. And then we weren't seeing people stick around. And then we weren't seeing all the byproducts of all the things we thought we would see with, tremendous success. And that kind of led us to, our first year where we kind of stalled in growth. And we kind of scratched our heads and what's going on. And, my business partner, Blake, at the time, he was the managing partner. And, he said, hey, we want you to consider taking over. And I was like, dude, I'm a creative. I have no interest in running the company. And they're like, no, you have a point of view on our products. And I think that, what we were doing before is we were on that hamster wheel that Tom, you were talking about. And it felt good because we were being successful with some of the best brands out there, right? And we were telling some of the most incredible stories. We were traveling the world and we were growing, but not at the pace we thought. And so that had really led me to a desire to really stop kind of being inclusive of every brand out there, but starting to be exclusive and really kind of figure out who we were. And then that just kind of started to be this thread that we started to pull on, and just realizing, okay, we might really need to rethink and reimagine how we operate the business. And that then just kind of led me down a rabbit hole of, wow, we don't really know what we do. We know how we do it, and we can sell it to anybody, but we kind of reinvent the wheel every single time. And that's not sustainable. And that's when we kind of moved from, okay, we don't want to be heroic anymore. We want to move to something other, call them. And, the team around me were amazing to say, okay, hey, Cam, what do you think? And okay, we had to get buy-in. And by no means was this the Cam show in which I came in with this grand vision. It was kind of, I was still feeling away, around in the dark around, hey, here's what I think we need. We need to understand our product. We need to define our product. We need to systemize that. We need artifacts, and then we need to train our team. And that got us to know who we were, but then we didn't know how to scale, right? And so
let's go back one sec on that before we go to scale.
Yeah.
I think you nailed something super important. You said that when you started the business, everything was great. We were winning all this great work, and very gratifying, even though it took a lot of heroic effort, because you were doing work that was industry leading with reputable brands that attracted not only more customers, but more people that wanted to do awesome work, right? That's cool.
100%.
That's super exciting. But eventually it got to that point where, your partners were all kind of like, man, I don't know what's going wrong, because you said people were starting to leave, some of your good people. And you found yourself in a position, if I'm hearing you correctly, where you didn't have a lot of discipline about what you did for who, as much as it was, just trying to do great work, as a broad sense for pretty much any cool brand, right?
Pretty much. If they had a content need, we would kind of figure it out. And that was exciting, but not sustainable.
And that may have been what led to, burning some of your people out, certainly burning you and your partners out. Is that right?
100%.
That's awesome. And so then, I think the part that I just want to make sure we don't gloss over is that you identified that like, while we are really good at this account management and sales process, that we can pretty much sell anything to anyone, like that is what's keeping us from being our best, right? That I think you identified that. Is that right?
That was January 2019. And since then, we have more than 4x our company. Once we stopped trying to be inclusive of everything and everybody, but starting to be exclusive by identifying our expertise, what we can deliver better than anyone else in the industry, and focus on that. And then say, okay, great. Now we're going to systemize that so that we can bring in staff, we can grow and lead to scale, because they now know what to expect, right? We can set parameters of expectations. We can empower staff. We can empower leaders. We can let go, because that's the only way this thing's going to grow. But we had to figure out who we were, what it was, define that, write it down, make it codified, and then we can start on that journey.
It's super common that I hear people have this experience that's similar, and through that transformation, they have a hard time helping the team understand what it means to focus on like some service offerings. because they feel like every single customer is different and every project and opportunity or engagement is bespoke. How did you guys like identify the pattern or the methods that were repeatable and that you wanted to focus on?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And that was an all hands approach to, trial and error. Look, I went away and I wrote the magic scrolls the first time when I came back, and I was like, here you go, everyone, here's the plan. And everyone was like, yeah, no, that's not going to work, because it couldn't assimilate, because they couldn't get their head around my ideas, right? And so I made a huge misstep of trying to own it, thinking I was trying to quarterback and herald it for everyone else. And I was, falling on the sword. It was the wrong thing as a leader to do, to go to the mountaintop, come back and share with everyone. Instead, we had to absolutely dive in as a team, as by departments, and say, okay, what is the lowest common denominator of the services we offer and the way that we go about it? What's the big, medium, small version of all of these different intersections that we're seeing with our clients? And look, you really need to find someone who understands and identifies patterns of behavior and things. It's really helpful if in your company you can find someone who kind of recognizes those things and says, oh, I see these trends, and does that align with who we are? And so we did that. And honestly, I tell my staff all the time that version 5 is the only version that matters, right? Version 1 through 4, just enjoy messing them up, because you got to get to something of consequence, and you got to trial and error. And so we just did that over and over and over again. And then we ran those plays with our clients, and square peg round hole sometimes, but most of the time we started to figure out, okay, we've actually unlocked square peg, square hole here.
That's awesome. Are there any like aha moments along that journey of identifying your focus services that you said, these are the ones we're, identifying for sure we're doing, and maybe surprise yourself to say, man, we just shouldn't do this anymore? Like, what were the no's? What fell off what fell onto the cutting room floor?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and honestly, we did have someone come in, and I would recommend him to any of the agencies, named David Baker, and his whole emphasis is about expertise. And I absolutely need to give credit to David Baker, because he came in for 2 days and just hung out with us. He has an incredible book about expertise, and honestly, it's really, he's the one that drove the inclusive exclusive. So it was really about, okay, well, what does our dream client look like, and what can we offer them, and what are those services? And then as soon as you start to write those things down, you start to define what size budgets, you start to design and define what type of client, what level of client, how consistent that client needs to be. And you can start weeding out pretty quickly. Or are we talking Fortune 5,000, 2,000, 150, very quickly around what this product needs to look like. And for us, yeah, we wanted to move away from being wholly project to project, right? And really kind of find a balance in some project to project and some retainer-based work, but around a studio model. And so for us, we set a price point on budgets. We set a time frame around length of projects, or how quickly the projects needed to happen, and that set some parameters to allow us to have some parameters for success.
That's awesome. Love it. Yeah, and I second the David C. Baker recommendation. Sounds like that he's pretty active in SOTA as well. So yeah, great approach to this specific problem. I think learning to sell the craft and the method over the features is just such an important part of this transformation, because I think that, at first, the agency kind of, I believe, often lacks the confidence to position themselves as these like experts, as David C. Baker would say. So we need to back it up by saying, here's specifically what we're going to deliver. But ultimately, the customers, they want you to use the best method. They want you to use that expertise to help them get the best product. And I think that we need to be confident in positioning ourselves so that we don't have to like rely on the crutch of like very detailed SOW with every sale. Have you figured out, like, has the team figured out how to position and sell the method over those detailed SOWs?
Oh yeah, we have, over the last 3.5 years, Tom, a lot of help from you guys at Parallax to help systemize so many of these steps. Yeah, we've codified artifacts and a whole process, and we have handbooks and guidelines that our department leads are continuing to, evolve, that, yeah, just make everything as plug and play as possible, right? Kind of fill in the blanks, kind of Mad Libby kind of mindset, where it's like so easy to check those boxes versus having to reinvent the wheel and think outside the box. We have an 80-20 rule here at CM. Hey, if 80% of the time it can fall into a system, then it's amazing. We're not trying to make 100% of what we do here fall in, because there's just, that gets too rigorous. It gives it people who need flexibility and leadership and autonomy. They feel too boxed in and contained, and you don't want to cage your lions, right? You're incredible leaders. You don't want to put them in parameters where it's a straitjacket. So it's an 80-20 rule to where everyone knows, well, hey, this is to help automate and make this as easy as possible. And then the other 20%, well, we always have variables on every project and every scenario.
But I loved it 80-20. I think that it, for the baseline process, but then also for the way that we think about the approach for new business, because I just got done saying that, yes, every project and every customer is different and unique and special, but, what if we can establish like these methodologies that help us be more repeatable in the way that we deliver our work? Like that is, I guess, what I recommend as an aspiration, because if you could get just like 80% of the new business coming in to fit those baselines, then you really do have the flexibility to take on really creative and, boundary pushing work in the 20%. Because if every single project and client is truly unique and special, then is any client or project truly unique and special? Or do you have a process to handle unicorns? Probably, right? I think that the truth is, like, in order to put strategic energy and focus in those things that are going to innovate our craft and our brand, we do need to put some operational best practice around the stuff that isn't. And, we need to build those efficiencies in, and the processes that you described, Cam. I think that's so awesome, because then that's the training ground, the proving ground for your younger incoming, talent that has a lot of opportunity to learn from the worn path in the carpet, or the clearly documented like methodology that those creatives and designers and content, strategists that came before them have laid down. Do you guys take that into account as part of your like people process? Like, do you have the feeder system, if you will, that relies on some of that more repeatable work to bring in people and train them up?
Yeah, I mean, look, we grew really fast, and there might be some folks on the call that have heard of Conscious Minds, or we've worked in proximity, on a brand together, and it's kind of felt like a rocket ship strapped to our back. And we've been really excited, but also really cautious about this growth. And but I told our team, we are becoming a training company faster than I'm evolving as a content company, right? So when you're hiring as quickly as we did over this last 2.5, 3 years, it's onboarding, it's training, it's tools, it's all of these things. And so we wanted it, and we're, look, we actually kind of don't have the same hierarchy structure wise as a lot of agencies, traditional agencies, because we have the production and the post-production all in house. And so so that doesn't allow for plug and play of roles, right? So we have different titles, and so we really had to invest and evolve on a consistent basis, Tom, so that feeder program, when people come in, they can find their footing, they can find their confidence, they can find their ownership in their swim lanes, but then they can understand how it all works together quickly.
And that's what's so awesome, because I think one of the coolest parts about being leading a services company is that you're kind of naturally put into a position where you can evolve and grow the craft. And it's in your best interest to help your team develop their skills and capabilities and grow. And so to hear that you've kind of operationalized that is tremendous. And I do think, though, it takes, it's kind of silly, but we've started this conversation in positioning and sales, because I think that that's kind of the mindset that we need to start with. That what's cool about a professional services business, a consulting firm, an agency, is that every time we go out and sell new work is an opportunity to reinvent ourselves, and every time we execute a project, we can evolve the methodology or the craft. it's about having discipline to know when to and when not to. And I think that's what creates sustainable growth. It sounds like you guys have figured that out, which I think is super exciting.
I think we have. I don't know that I would say we've figured it out. I think we have found success in it, and I think exactly what you said, the word discipline. It, as soon as you have a lull, it gets really easy to then want to do and go back to the heroic, right? And look, I'll be honest, as a CEO of CM, like I said, we've been growing, but the economy's kind of doing something weird right now, and we're kind of hitting this lull right now. And we have had to let a few people go, right? And we have had that conversation that you just had around hiring and this, and about overreaching, but we had just planned for a new studio, and so we just hired a bunch of new staff for that, and we were so confident, and then the studio went away, and you're left holding the bag. And so, look, what I'll say is this: I think that we have established a culture, a new culture. We've pivoted our culture, and we believe that culture is what you do, not just what you say, right? And so we're working really hard to be doing these things, and I think we have to keep, it's like an every week battle and conversation, right? And it's not that argument and the heroic mindset as much that happens there. It's a lot less of that. But now it's like, okay, do we have the discipline to stay in this and not to jump ship when something happens with a client or with a retainer or something?
Yeah. I love that. I love what you said about it's not what you say, just what you say, it's what you do. I think that's absolutely right. And that's, I think that a big part of what I believe is that we can democratize the work and the decisions and the those cultural elements of what we do, but I think it's very important that we set very clear expectations for people about what that means, and then also give them the tools and like the visibility to make decisions as we would with a wider perspective. Obviously that's what we're building Parallax for. So again, this isn't a Parallax like sales pitch as much as it is about the mindset and the philosophy. Like for an example, I believe that like account managers or project managers or producers, the people who actually like manage the work that's being done, I think that often this heroic organizations, they have an expectation for profitability on an account level, and yet they're not providing the tools and the insight into what drives that profitability necessarily to the individual contributors. Things like what an hour costs us that we work versus how much we get paid, or in a retainer, where's the wiggle room of like going a little bit above and beyond to do really great work and going too far beyond where we're writing stuff off. How did you guys like grow into that level of maturity where you could, I like to say, like democratize that effort, but empower the people by giving them the visibility and the tooling to understand the wider reason behind or things that drive project performance, for an example?
Yeah, no, I mean, Tom, that's a great question, because again, I made the wrong choice early days. When I took over as managing partner CEO, I jumped in the driver's seat, and I got, I needed to find the right tools and define all these things, and I did it all, and I stumbled upon Parallax, and it was just like, and then it was like, okay, let's go. And I kept Parallax to myself, right? I was the only one seeing, and then I was trying to puppeteer everything, and that got really messy because I wanted all the information and insights and perspective, and then the team was just having to like take my word for it, right? And that lasted like 3 weeks, and then that led me back to okay, you're not being a great leader here, you're not empowering others, and so I had to kind of come out of that cocoon to okay, great, what does that look like? And again, it was King Arthur's table with our leaders and saying like, hey, do you understand this? And they're like, this is what we've been asking for and wanting and needing. And I was like, okay, great. So how do we not make every conversation in the agency about money? Right? How do we not make every decision about, oh, there's not enough money, oh, there's this, or oh, that person's too much, and I didn't want everyone stressed out, you know? And so that's what I was really worried about. That's why I kind of held it again on my shoulders and was trying to be that hero. And you know what, man, the fact of the matter is that we all have incredible people at our companies, right?
Exactly right.
And they have more potential than even though I give them credit for so much, they have more, and they have a greater understanding, and they have a greater commitment to our organizations and our team and our team's families. I mean, you know, it just trickles down. And so they all came in and kind of just laddered up in their accountability, in their authenticity, in their protection of the organization, of the team. And it wasn't about the margin. It wasn't about everything. It was still about the clients. It was still about the margin. It was still about the team. They found such an amazing balance in it all. And honestly, look, man, I'm not even in the parallax management anymore, right? Like it's probably been 18 months, 2 years that I've been out of that, because they took it over and they know how to manage it, and they have that sense of autonomy, right? A sense of empowerment. And honestly, from a recruiting retention standpoint, I haven't lost any of those leaders. Those leaders are still here and blossoming and growing because they have been given, I won't say the keys of the kingdom, but like I think that they absolutely have their hands on the steering wheels of understanding and transparency, which then has allowed them to, lead for CM in a way that I didn't anticipate.
I love that. I mean, it's back to your 80-20 comment. Like if we can empower the frontline employees who are closest to the people, whether those people are our customers or our fellow workers, the creatives, if we can empower them with like the decision-making tools that are guided by the principles, the culture, they'll always exceed our expectations. I agree with you on that. You know, we don't hire these really smart people to tell them what to do, but we do need to, we need to empower them, but we also need to give them that wider scope, that wider perspective that help them learn from what we've learned over the years. And so that's another reason why I think that these baseline habits and behaviors, and I'm going to flash my screen one more time, because just to kind of put that up as a reminder, it's not rocket science. It's not like a bunch of work. You guys are, many customers of ours and people that I meet through this process are already doing many of these things, like, have some governance and some like, rigor around getting timesheets done, review them. It's pretty simple. This one I think is less common, where there's some rigor and process around understanding what's in that new business pipeline to a higher fidelity than just the booking value of, if we close this deal, it's worth $500,000 in revenue. Understanding a little bit more, have some more, context around what kind of roles we're going to need when, and update that just once a week. And then also like, we're talking about like that managing projects or accounts to margin, but also like empowering those frontline project managers, account managers, producers to have some like a forward look of like, who do I need on this project for how long, which capabilities, and ask them to update that once a week, with some autonomy. Don't control it in that spreadsheet that only one person has access to because it's so fragile, and because this project manager doesn't understand like what it means to take someone off of this and put it in this, but give them that visibility, help them understand what it means, what we're trading off, what the conflicts are, put it in their hands. That's what we think we should do. And then if you're already doing, or if you're not doing a weekly resource planning meeting, this should be only managing big exceptions, not a 2-hour meeting where we go through every account, because we've empowered our people at the front line to make some of those decisions and those trade-offs and those negotiations amongst themselves ahead of that meeting. And we believe, and I'm happy to send you some more detail on this, anyone who's interested, but we believe that there's some like very specific things that companies should be looking at every week as far as like operational KPIs. And so, Cam, we went through a lot of this in a couple of years ago, and you guys have like exceeded our expectations and really taught us what's possible for change in an organization. But maybe before we kind of cut to questions, I wonder, of those, like, what of these like foundational habits and behaviors do you think your team, that really benefited the team to pick up, so that you could have better forecasts, so that you have better foresight into how the business is changing and where it needs your attention specifically at a strategic level?
Yeah, it's a great question because you just want to say all of them. Because we really did, we were lucky enough to implement a lot of this early, and then that kind of led to the growth. So every person who joined, they kind of saw that this is the table stakes, right? But for that original contingency of staff and partners and leaders, I'll say that the three parts that made the biggest impact was, yes, measuring new business, and not just as booking value, but in understanding the variables and kind of, again, creating criteria for success, for measuring it and moving it through the sales funnel, and very specific at every stage there.
Yeah.
And before, again, it was just that instinctual, oh, I feel 50% on this. No, we really codified and crafted a whole sales funnel. And then in terms of doing the work, and getting or bidding the work, we created shapes, we created products that we believed, hey, this represented. And again, we've looked for those trends, and that got everyone into a like-mindedness, right? So that when a random shape project came, they go, well, I think we could do it like this with this product that we have, with this service offering. That brought everyone together, and it allowed us, again, to deal with a 20% variable.
Yeah.
And so, but we had to put the stake in the ground, and we had to say, this is what we think these are. And then every once in a while, we'll have a project that just was outside of those bounds. And then look, culture-wise, getting people to do time cards.
Yeah.
It sucks. I came from a very traditional agency that I will not name them, but a very big traditional agency. And that was my first agency experience. And you had to have a time card filled out at 8:30 every morning. And if you missed it after 7 times, you get penalized by, docking your paycheck. And I understood why once I started to run our own shop. But building a culture of understanding why, to where people are committed, that, hey, it helps my life be balanced, and them to plan my PTO and my utilization and my project things, like, that's what it's there for, right? It's to help protect people and have boundaries and to create a good workload and a good work-life balance. That's what we've made it about for our staff, and not trying to like trick them into this manipulation of like, hey, it's still about profits and things. No, it's about us. We can plan for you. We can plan for your partners and your other staff. So that was the hardest one, because it just takes an entire culture to buy into that.
I love it. And, I wish we had, I think we've got 10 minutes left, so we should probably cut to Q&A, but I think that maybe it'll come up in Q&A that I think you guys had a pretty good transition from expecting a lot of precision in timesheets to being like just more accurate, maybe not down to the 15 minutes, but maybe half day or full day on time cards. That precision, I think, sometimes stands in the way of accuracy because it's just hard to be consistent, So anyway,
yeah,
I think you guys did a good job of that. So let me ask, how do we want to do this? Lakai, how do we want to do the Q&A? Should I just read them from the chat? Do you want to moderate it a bit, or?
Sure. So we can open the line for Q&A. If there's any questions that you want to ask, either Tom or Cam, feel free to drop those in the chat or the Q&A pod, and we'll get them addressed. There were some that came through, so I can just ask them, and then we can let the questions filter in. So Cam, this comes from Nick at Funkhouse. They're a team of about 20, and he's curious to know, as you were going from project work to retainer, or how did you start the measurement and your growth plans? He's finding that they're very much in the heroic stage. They're all busy, but definitely not aware of the margins on projects versus others.
Yeah, that's a great question, Nick. So yes, when we started this, we were 95% retainer work, project work, apologies. We were 95% project work. And what we did in working with Parallax and our budgets is to actually start to track. Okay, great. We would set up a budget. Let's just say, it's $500,000, whatever. We'd start on a project, and then we would get it done. We would tell ourselves we were profitable because we didn't spend X amount of money on production or outside vendors or whatever, and we got it done on time. But were we actually profitable, right? We could not actually measure it. And so this, using Parallax, using any kind of tracking tool to start to really understand, okay, we think it's going to be this in our estimation. We're going to track this. We could have those real-time momentary check-ins, right? And understanding, moving resourcing around. And so, yes, we went from the busy always busy, always on, running from one thing to another, to now being really confident about our shapes and how much time it will take. And because of that, we got to that 80-20 rule. Then we could start adding in one more project and another project, and then hiring 5 more people, and starting to balance more and more of a load.
And I think that one thing I observed, Cam, and maybe I made this up, but it seemed like I remember it from when we were onboarding, is you also kind of quickly learned that it wasn't about every period of your retainers being profitable. It was about like the trend and whether or not the entire like year of the retainer was going to be profitable, because nothing ever goes perfectly as planned, right? How did you build the patience if there was a month or two that wasn't as profitable, but you felt like you needed to, like, quote unquote, overserve that customer? How did you guys build a culture around like having that patience but foresight into how the project would perform overall?
It's a great question. And what we did in those moments, Tom, is we invested in bettering our briefing process and ingestion process of our sales pipeline. Hey, was this new information that we could have known at the early stages, right? Were these variables that had existed and we failed to ask questions about, we didn't have enough information about, or was this just a pivot that we dropped the ball on, we underestimated how much work it would take? And this is on us. And we have an empowerment cycle here at CM that I created, and it starts with set expectation, let them execute the play, and then evaluate. And if you don't do the evaluation process, then you don't get the value of the entire process. And look, we want to get to this fail faster mindset, but not even fail faster, it's try faster. And so in those moments, it was all a win, because we could learn and we would get knowledge, and we'd apply it to our shapes, we would apply it to our ingestion process, we would apply it to our project management process. And we just took it as, hey, this is the cost of doing business, is that you have to learn these things, and you have to have grace with yourself as a leader, have grace with your entire staff, or of leaders who are running these kinds at that level, and then chalk it up as, hey, we're gonna win. And it, you can see what it has paid dividends for us.
I absolutely. And I love what you said about the empowerment cycle. I think that I can attest to that. It's a reality at Conscious Mind. I saw it happen. And it's so cool when you have like, if once a week you are like being honest with yourselves around what that like engagement is going to look like going forward based on what it has looked like. That like empowerment cycle can be more monthly, less when the project's done, like I think that if we're looking at it on a regular basis, on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, and saying like, yeah, that last 2 weeks, we are over budget for the retainer, but that's allowed us to adjust going forward. Maybe we had to upsell the retainer. Maybe we had to streamline the process, but we're taking those real learnings into account and on a regular cadence. I think that's what's so powerful, in my opinion, about what you guys were able to do. And, you spoke earlier about, helping people understand why do timesheets. I've talked to so many agency owners who've like done the big song and dance for their employees. Like, we do timesheets so we could better help estimate, projects in the future. I'm curious, Cam, how, like, that's really hard to do, to go back and like retro look at a project after it's done. How much does that like empowerment cadence that's on a more like weekly or monthly basis helps you like make that promise true, like the actually adapting to what happens, as opposed to, we're going to like someday rewrite all of our scoping because we look back at the history of 10 projects,
It's kind of like your phone, right? You have a billion photos that you've taken of all these important moments. And it's like, do you ever go back and just look at all of the photos? It's kind of like that. And I often wonder when I'm going to do it. But again, happenstance this morning, an iPad slideshow shows up, and I grab my 8-year-old, and I'm just like, look at these photos, man. This is 5 years ago in Portland. So I think, look, I have the guiding principle that they respect what you inspect. And as a leader, I think that if you do not inspect it and you do not dig into it with your team in a most encouraging and thoughtful way, then the value of that tool will just continue to decrease, because it'll become irrelevant, right? And so if the information becomes irrelevant, then you're just doing stuff to stay busy, and you're doing things because that's what leaders do, and it's just like, it's not productive in any way, shape, or form. And then that's when we get exhausted and it's not sustainable. So look, for us, we do it on a monthly cadence. I have a monthly wrap meeting. It's 2 hours long. I sit with my head of studio operations. I don't even sit with each of the project managers, and we look across all of the projects that have wrapped, and we look at the trend line. Yes, we're looking at the trend line. A grace abounds in all of those conversations, but we're looking at, okay, profitability. We're looking at how accurate we were in parallax, and it's just one number. Were we at 100%? Were we at 125%? Were we at 80%? Right? I kind of have these benchmarks of, okay, well, why did we hit that versus, you know, this? Why did we go over versus hit on track? And they say, look, the client pivoted. It's like, okay, that happens, right? And so we do take that information and we do reshape probably once a quarter. We're going through and reshaping our products and taking all those trends and applying them to our products to make sure that they're ready for bids.
That's awesome. Do we have time for that next question from Nick? He asked if there were, you know, when you were at around 20 people and going through this transformation, was there any, in retrospect, was there any like strategic hires that you're glad you made or that you wish you made? Or did you do most of this recalibration with your existing team?
That's a good question. At 20, I did most of it myself at 20. And, you know, 20, the head count is really tight. It feels like, you know, to dedicate committed resources. But I think it was right around that time that we did bring in someone to start to own this whole process of ingestion and project shaping and kind of building creative resourcing across the agency. And I would absolutely recommend that. They also manage freelancers and all these kinds of things. So they really had their hands on the steering wheel. But again, trying to find that person, it was a very difficult task because you pluck that person from another organization, right? And so, so Nick, I think I would look for someone within the organization. Like I said, looking for patterns, you know, but I think the sandbox needs to kind of be defined by a group and a collective, and then you need to ride that together for a while, and then you can evolve that together as a team. Would probably be my recommendation.
I couldn't agree more. I think that you know, you can lay down a lot of this foundation, and then it kind of helps you identify which person you need to hire, which specific role is the gap. You can lay down this foundation. It doesn't have to be that hard. You know, I think especially if you have some discipline into, like, you know, draw the 4 box on the whiteboard and figure out which has the highest impact with the most minimal effort from your team. Which of these, you know, baseline habits should we focus on first, right? I'm sure you did that, Cam. Like, we didn't do all of this at once. You identified which was, you know, highest impact, lowest effort, and we evolved from there. It's a journey, right? I mean, it's not going to happen overnight, but within a month or two, you can make some impact if you focus.
Oh, tremendous. Yeah, tremendous. And we're still ever evolving, but yeah, I mean, it takes time. It's a massive investment, but it pays great dividends.
Well, our marketing director is telling me to put the slide on here where you can learn more. So that must mean we're supposed to be wrapping up. Is that right?
Yes, we're right up against the hour. I do want to thank you, Tom, and the Parallax team for helping us put this session together. And of course, you, Cam, and the studios for being a participant. As a reminder, we have recorded this session. We will return it to you and your teams, along with the slides and contact information for everybody on the call today. With that being said, we thank you for your time and your participation. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Soon. Bye-bye.